And, you know, floor traders, when they first came in, they always had this idea, like equity traders at the cash open, they have this idea of if the low is set at the initial balance, then it's going to be a bullish day. If the high was set at the initial balance, it was going to be a bearish day. Well, markets generally, as a rule, have that same bigger macro narrative, and this is how it works. It's all to do with the Brent oil WTI spreads, or basically the London session versus the New York session. The London session, as a rule, comes in obviously from the Asia session, and if the Asia session is balanced, if it's going to be a bearish market, the norm would be to run the stops at the top side to get short and then sell it. And obviously, we should take out the Asia session low by the time we hit the US Open. And then at the US Open, the idea is to reaccumulate, bearing in mind that it's a bearish day, is to reaccumulate and then go for the low of the day again. The low should be put in the WTI session. And then the next day, if it's going to be bullish, they'll take it down from the Asia session. I've just missed out the Asia session here, but let's assume the Asia session was here. So they take it down in the Brent session to buy it, and then they take it up, and then they take it down into the US session to buy it, and then the high of the day is the US session. So if we now look at that from what happened today, you can see why the narrative is a little bit off point, just a little bit off point, because we had the Asia session, right? So there's our Asia session, for example, there. And then we had the London session. Well, the London session did exactly what we would have wanted it to do. It ran into the top edges, gave us this brilliant setup structure. And then, of course, we got the sell-off. Well, the one thing we were now expecting was we were expecting this to take place. But usually, as a rule, we would expect that to take place below the highs. So generally, that's what happens. But on this occasion, of course, what we got was we got that taking place. So now that throws us into more of a possible neutral structure rather than a bullish or a bearish structure. You know, so we kind of understand that we might end up with something that looks maybe a little bit more like this. But obviously, if we can make the low of the day should be, you know, if this is bullish at the moment, the low of the day is the London session. And the high of the day is the New York session. So that's where the challenge is. That's not the norm. On Forex, on equities, or anything else, that's not the norm. You know, so this has to be now accepted just as a little bit of an anomaly. And, you know, on the basis that, you know, you see how the London session formed here, it looked really strong as a story at that stage. And the only thing that was a bit of a surprise was this gasoline pop here. But as I said, we did have some OPEC numbers coming out, which caused a little bit of a punch. But you can see that this is now this idea here is kind of thrown this into a little bit more of a disarray, and it may end up being this kind of idea here where we end up just getting a kind of balance day, and people just clear out positions ahead of CPI and ahead of Fed tomorrow, of course. But I'd still like to see that developing, because that would still make perfect sense if it wasn't for this here. If it wasn't for that here, this would still be a very definite sell-off towards 77 today, and I think that would have been a given that we would have traded 77. But that higher pop there, yeah, that's thrown me a little bit. But still, nonetheless, we got in at 77.90. We've just traded 77.36s. I'm very, very happy to bag and tag my $500 plus a bit of change again, and we've been buying this line almost the entire day so far, haven't we? You know, so the scenario is still pretty strong. What we would now like to see is now like to see it building into a possible short again. So this should stay as a flat bottom edge. We should now build a spiky top edge, and then we can think about getting that sweep down towards the 77s. But if that's not what happens, if we come up here and we come down here and we start building a flat top edge here, and then we start accelerating to the downside, but every time we drop through here, we start getting a spike, we know that this market's just gone net bullish, and we can expect the price to then possibly hold here for the close, and then maybe the lower lows at London could give us a trade for tomorrow. We don't know yet. No, but this is where it's at the moment. It's always about developing out those scenarios.